Hi folks, so Mercury went direct yesterday in the sign of Aquarius, where it has been retrograde for about 3 weeks. And Mercury moves out of the sign of Aquarius and into Pisces on March the 16th. In addition, we had a new moon in Aquarius a few days ago. We're headed towards the full moon in Virgo on February the 27th, and then the new moon after that is of course in the next sign of Pisces on March the 13th. So till March the 13th, the new moon in Aquarius remains active. Until March the 16th, Mercury remains in Aquarius. So till about March the 16th, this first of 3 timelines that I've been talking about in the sign of Aquarius remains active. The first of the timelines being the annual Sun, Mercury, Venus transit through Aquarius, including the new moon. The second timeline taking us to the beginning of 2023 with Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. Jupiter leaves Aquarius at the end of this year, 2021. Jupiter and Saturn remain in Aquarius. Saturn remains behind in Aquarius till the beginning of 2023. And then, of course, there's the third largest cycle in the sign of Aquarius till 2040, when the next Jupiter-Saturn grand conjunction occurs in Libra. So this was the first of the Mercury retrogrades in the sign of Aquarius. I feel like I should mention that. We will have another 2 or 3 at least as we look ahead a few years. Mercury goes retrograde in the same family of signs, now the air signs, for a few years. So we're going to be dealing with wherever Aquarius sits in your chart around this time, around the time when the Sun transits Aquarius. We're going to experience Mercury retrogrades for the next couple of years at least in the sign of Aquarius. So that I think is worth mentioning, because the purpose of this video, I've done a couple of videos on Mercury retrograde and plenty of videos on Aquarius anyway, because we have had so many planets in Aquarius. We've had the new moon, we've had Venus there, we've had the Sun there, Jupiter and Saturn there. So our videos, indeed our experiences, have been Aquarius heavy. They might have been Aquarius heavy, but as I mentioned in my last new moon in Aquarius video, we haven't been ready to take action. And it's going to be this coming week when we become ready to take action. The question is, what action do we take? Now, the sign of Aquarius has to do with, among other things, but most essentially as far as I'm concerned, social equality, justice, and our experience in groups and communities, friendships, unconventional but truthful relationships. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to stick to social economic equality as a theme. So from a broad perspective, we might be able to expect, and I'm talking about the United States here, the new administration as we head towards March the 16th, having come to grips with what it finds, start to move towards implementation of practices and policies that will define it for the next couple of years, with the second timeline if I think about it, but also act on some of what is needed and some of what has been fomenting since the beginning of 2020, since the first half of 2020 when Saturn first came into Aquarius, and we saw, for example, the Black Lives Matter movements and some of the other, the increased vocal, vociferous demands to investigate where it is that things may not be properly aligned systemically. And whichever side of the political spectrum you fall on, these are things that are up for examination. And so now with Mercury direct, and now that the new moon occurred a few days ago, now that Mercury is direct and we're no longer in this, let me take stock of where everything is at and get a sense of where things are at, and I had this plan, but let me test it, and what does this mean, and the percolating and not being able to make up our minds and investigating data. And now that that is over, we will see more concrete solutions, plans start to be put in place and rolled out. Okay. More interesting to me in these videos is how this applies to you personally. So if you know your birth chart and you know which house Aquarius occupies and what that house stands for, this is going to make even more sense. So the question now becomes, what action needs to be taken in that part of the chart? That part of the chart is certainly is extremely important. not only for the next 20 years, but certainly for the next couple of years. And the question becomes, how do we determine what action needs to be taken? Part of the clue sits in the fact that during this Mercury retrograde, as I've mentioned in my Venus in Aquarius video, Venus has been here. And Venus's relationship with the planets Saturn and Jupiter, and what Jupiter and Saturn are trying to do, become extremely relevant in terms of determining what action we take and how we communicate with Mercury now direct, and how we put plans into place. Communicate, transact. Mercury rules commuting to, but communicating, transaction, cognition. All of that is going to enable us to put things in motion and indeed make some decisions and start to sign on the dotted lines on various things. But what do we sign on? What do we act on? Do we act on things that may have become clear or may have been presented to us while Mercury was retrograde? So one way to deal with the Mercury retrograde is to say, I'm going to push out all my signatures, all my contract signing till after Mercury goes direct. And just on that note, there's every chance or possibility if something got signed or delivered or dealt with in the last 3 weeks prior to yesterday, there's a possibility or chance that more information will come out regarding it, or it may not have been the right time to complete something. I would not despair. I would just be open to what it is that may need to be corrected moving forward. There may be something about it that isn't final, that needs to be revised, that needs to be corrected as time goes on. With Venus in Aquarius during this time, I have mentioned it is very important to get in touch with what it is you value. And with Saturn in this part of the chart, it's extremely important to get a handle on prior beliefs and practices that have been self-defeating, and trying to equate them to this part of the chart where Aquarius sits in. Because with Saturn here over the next 2 years, there are lessons that we're meant to learn, and hurdles that we're meant to jump over, and strengths and skills we're meant to build, which ultimately, as Saturn leaves, could lead us with something very concrete and very solid as a result, a real gift. The question is, can we somehow accelerate that gift process through this first timeline by not falling into what is for each of us the path of least resistance? One way in which to do that is to assume that certain decisions were made while Mercury was retrograde, or certain things were given to you, and you've postponed the final decision making or the signing of them. But if you're going to sign on something that doesn't change after Mercury goes direct, you may as well have signed it while Mercury was retrograde. The question is, let's say something was presented to you over the last 3 weeks. It could have been presented to you physically, or it was a sense of a conclusion you reached about something pertaining to this part of the chart where Aquarius sits. The important thing as Mercury goes direct is to use the Mercury direct energy and use all the percolating that you've been doing over the past 6 weeks while Mercury has been in Aquarius, 3 of which it has been retrograde, to really determine through the lens of not falling into the path of least resistance, paying attention to what you feel are your patterns and your beliefs that have been holding you back, but are a little bit scary, are skills or areas that you need to acquire and grow into that'll help really maximize your potential in this part of the chart. And to be brave enough to really look at what you value, what is important to you, with decisions that need to be made and actions that need to be taken, and ask for or revise or move in a new direction. That comes as a result of the Mercury retrograde. So one thing to avoid doing, or at least to really look at it with intention, is to ensure that if you reach some sort of a conclusion of the past 3 weeks after Mercury goes direct, you're not using Mercury going direct as a formality to just sign on something that has been in place for the past 3 weeks, because then you may well have signed on it while Mercury was retrograde. The purpose of Mercury going direct is to relook at things now, to employ, and through the lens of what it is you value, through the lens of self-defeating beliefs and practices which you really believe need to be retired because they're holding you back from maximizing your potential, and make decisions from that place. By doing that, you may find that you do not end up making mistakes that will be up for correction over the next 2 years. Jupiter in the sign of Aquarius this year is creating the end of a 12-year cycle and the start of a 12-year cycle. So you're going to get that auspicious new beginning from Jupiter this year anyway. The question with Saturn's presence in Aquarius too is, how painful do you want to make this ending and new beginning? And Saturn always delivers karmic consequences to teach us what it is here to teach. And Saturn also has a tendency to keep repeating lessons while it is in a particular part of the chart. So can you, as you head into this coming week, get clear on what it is that you value, where it is that you deliver value, and what it is that you value? Can you look at self-defeating patterns, beliefs that have been holding you back and that have either not been giving you what it is that you want, or that have not allowed you to fulfill your highest potential, the most that you have to offer? And can you make decisions moving forward, especially by March the 16th? But some of this may occur by March the 4th, because a direct Mercury met up with Jupiter, then it was retrograde, met up with Jupiter again, and now is direct on March the 4th, meets up with Jupiter. So this idea of creating an auspicious new beginning and ending a 12-year cycle and starting a new 12-year cycle, that March 4th date becomes another inauguration. And the planet of communication, cognition, commuting, neighbors, siblings, relatives, talk, gossip, contracts, signing things, social media, technology, meets up with the planet of auspicious new beginnings on March the 4th. And so the question again, I'm saying it for the umpteenth time in this reading, can you try not to just, now that Mercury is direct, go ahead and sign things and move forward using the path of least resistance. Maybe use Monday and Tuesday to really think about what you have learned over the past 6 weeks, what your goals are, what your agenda is, what you value, what you want, what you really think you need to go for, and look at the lens of what is on offer based on that. Now, based on that, some people may say, well, then I just need to toss out what is on the table. You may need to toss out what is on the table and move in a new direction full of courage. Or you may need to revise what is on the table and not throw it out. You may need to go back to whoever it is that you are in communication with, or whatever it is, whether it is yourself on a plan for something, whether it is other people, and see if things can be shifted and compromises can be reached based on what feels right for you right now. So if someone says, let's do this for a year, you may go back and say, let's do this for 3 or 4 months and let's see if the following changes are in place. And if not, then let's part ways, because it's really important for me, based on all the soul searching I have been doing and thinking that I've been doing, to ensure that this is in play, whatever that is for you. I'm just giving you an example, okay? Mercury going direct yesterday till April the 18th, when Mercury meets up with the Sun again, is an implementation phase when it comes to communication and transacting, related to the sign of Aquarius. So that's another date, another timeline you're working towards. When Mercury goes direct after it has been retrograde, and till when Mercury meets up with the Sun again on April the 18th, is a time of implementation. So not only do you have a March 4th date, you have an April 18th date. Mercury in Aquarius, an important transit because it's going to occur again for the next couple of years, next year especially. It's a time of action. The other thing I have to tell you in no uncertain terms, and I don't always see this, is that we have 3 months of forward movement from all the personal planets. Until the end of April, when Pluto goes retrograde, and then sometime in May when Saturn goes retrograde, and at the end of May is when Mercury goes retrograde. Till April, in the 20s, I think Pluto goes retrograde, April 20th, 24th, something like that. All planets are direct, every single one of them. So I am promising you 3 months of forward movement, but at least 2 months of forward movement. This kind of 2 to 3 months of forward movement, at some point over the next 3 months, I wouldn't be surprised if you're just crying, uncle, make it stop. Can a planet please go retrograde? Because I need to catch up to all this forward movement. There's a wave that is starting to build. So fasten your seatbelts or unfasten them, depending on what it is that you're feeling revved up to go and do it. It's a time of action, and the time of action begins as this week begins. So if you want to take a couple of days more as Mercury gains direction to get clear on, Venus leaves Aquarius on the 25th. If you want to, and the 23rd onwards, really as far as I'm concerned, you can really start the conversation. You can even start tomorrow. I would say spend the next couple of days, if you know where Aquarius sits in your chart, getting clear on what you want to do. And at least have the courage to identify what you would want to do if you knew you could not fail. You know, there's that kind of adage that floats around there. Or if you had your druthers. Kind of go for, at least to yourself, depicting your ideal plan. And then see how it is that you can move towards it. And that ideal plan would be based on what you value, what is important to you, your own sense of whatever it is that you bring value, what it is that you want to construct, what you want to build, and not following the path of least resistance that would have you falling into patterns and behaviors that have been now brought to your attention, that have been in place forever and ever and ever, that you may not have been aware of, but are now aware of, but are holding you back and not enabling you to meet your fullest potential, and may be karmically problematic. It is a year of new beginnings, but Saturn is going to be teaching you those lessons. So can you accelerate or mitigate those lessons by taking on a sense of karmic responsibility, and letting that inform your actions now that the horses are ready to get out of the gates in the sign of Aquarius. It's an exciting time. So have courage and see where it takes you. Take responsibility for your decisions. Take responsibility for your decisions. Take responsibility for your communications. Take responsibility for what you're building and what you're starting to put in place. If you like this video, found it useful, feel free to share it. I'm happy with this video, actually. Feel free to comment on it, subscribe to my channel, click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button so that you're notified every time I do new video. My contact information is in the description box below. You can contact me for rates for readings. I also create easy to read versions of birth charts that tell you which sign is in which house and what those houses stand for. So you can inquire regarding rates for those as well. Don't send me your personal information like your birthday, time, and location until you know you want to move forward with me. I will leave it at that. The next video, I want to talk about the sun having moved into the sign of Pisces and the action that is going to be building in Pisces over the next couple of months. So we'll take it from there. One more thought that I'm going to just say. Last week, I think the 20th, 21st, we're coming to the end of a 2-week period that is the 2-month anniversary of the December 14th eclipse, February the 14th, a week before, week after. So if you know where the sign of Sagittarius is in your chart and what needs to be released there, the last couple of weeks may have given you some important clues about what needs to be dealt with there as well. And one more thing I want to mention to you, whatever action you're taking in the sign of Aquarius is going to have a direct result on the liberation and growth that Uranus is trying to create for you in the sign of Taurus, wherever Taurus sits in your chart. Now I feel even better about this video. All right? Thanks for your attention.